One of my favorite cakes in the entire world is an angel food cake, especially one that you make at home. Take a look at that. Mom made it for me. Wasn't that nice of her? She's going to show you how to make one as well.
Once you've had a homemade angel food cake, you'll never buy a boxed mix again. My mom spoiled us to this when she was still cooking, and we would follow her recipe, and I want to show you how it's made today. It's not as hard as you think. A lot of people kind of fear it because of all the egg whites and stuff you have to beat, but it's really very easy. And out of all the ones I've made, I've only messed up one. And it was a doozy. First of all, we're going to divide the eggs. Now the eggs beat better if you let them come to room temperature first, and that usually takes about an hour, just setting out on the counter. You don't want any egg yolk in these egg whites at all, or your egg whites, they'll beat up, but they just do not beat up as good as they should. Any kind of grease or oil or anything at all like that in your pan, it will keep them from beating up, being fluffy like they need to be. Okay, I have cracked 12 large eggs. I've put the yolk in one little thing, and I'm going to save those because that's just about what you need to make ice cream if you want ice cream to go with a cake or something later on. But in this pan I have 12 egg yolk with hopefully no egg shell and no egg yolk. Okay, I have got my eggs separated, and I am now going to have 1 cup of flour, and I'm putting it in this sieve along with 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. Okay, we are sifting this together because when we add this dry ingredients to our egg whites, we do not want any lumps in there. And I know this seems like it's a meaningless job, but this makes a difference. And as you can see, there's little hard pieces there that's kind of formed from the powdered sugar or from the flour itself. You can just mash those and go ahead and put them through, but you don't want that in your egg whites because, believe you me, it doesn't mix up well. Okay, this has to be sifted 3 times, and I've put it on wax paper. I've sifted it onto wax paper because that makes it so much easier than to put it into the egg whites whenever you're actually adding it. But right now, it's just put that back in the sieve, and we're going to sift it 2 more times. Okay, we've got that sifted 3 times, and I'm kind of bunching it up a little bit on that wax paper. Now then, to my egg whites, I am going to add 1.5 teaspoons of cream tartar and 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla. We were taught never to measure over the bowl, but as you see, I do that once in a while anyway. Okay, we're going to turn that on just low, kind of mix that in a little bit, get that cream of tartar in there so we don't blow it all over everything. And then we're going to gradually increase that, and we're going to beat this until it becomes fluffy and will hold a peak. Okay, it looks like it's beginning to get a little thickened. I'm going to turn that down, and I'm going to lift this up just so I can check to see. Now you can see that it's holding its shape down here, and it's not leaking out into that. So it is now time turn it back on and slowly add 1 cup of granulated sugar. You want it fast enough to where it's going to beat that in and keep them egg whites going, but not so fast it slings it back out onto you. Gradually add that in. And you'll see the egg whites begin to take on a different consistency once the sugar is in there. Don't get in any hurry. You want that sugar to dissolve in those egg whites. That's going to take a couple of minutes. Okay, as you can see while it's beating, it's beginning to kind of take shape. It's holding those lines in it as it beats. So I'm going to turn that off. And this is just us checking it. Okay, you can see how well that holds. It is not beaten so much that it is dry. You don't want it to become dry. You can actually beat it till it's dry, but see, it's a holding on to that beater and not coming off. So when you get to that stage, you know your egg whites are done. And this is where I usually lick that beater. Okay, now we're not going to beat this, but we're going to gradually add the flour mixture now. And this is what takes so long. Is just, you want to sprinkle that loosely over the top and then begin to fold it in. You don't want to beat that in because it does change the consistency of the egg white if you beat the flour in. You need to fold it in. You're wanting to maintain the lightness and the fluffiness of those egg whites. And here is where the wax paper comes in really handy, because you can just fold it and pick it up and lightly tap in a little along as you go. You want to be sure you get down in the bottom of your mixing bowl. My bowl has sort of a little dip in there, and I want to be sure I get down in there, or I'll have egg whites and no flour in that part. You don't have to mix it to where that absolutely everything's mixed up before you add more flour. Just make sure it's not bunching up and looking too dry. That's why we're not adding very much at a time. Oh, I love a homemade angel food cake. You can put an icing on it, but you don't have to. You can put fresh fruit on it, but you don't have to. You can just eat it just like it is. And in fact, that's the way we like it the best. On most cakes, whenever they talk about adding your dry ingredients to your wet, they'll say about 1/3 at a time. But with angel food cake, I'd make it a few more times besides just in thirds. That way you don't have to worry about that flour bunching up inside that egg white. It's just mixing up really well this morning. And if you have fresh eggs, you may not even need 12. We're looking at approximately 1.5 cups of egg white, and extra large homegrown eggs seem like they are just a little more white in them. And they're larger than what you get at the store when they say large too. And in a box of 12 eggs at the store, they are sold per weight. So you may have some eggs that are larger than the other ones, but they're all counted as large eggs. I didn't know that for a long time, because sometimes I'd open it up and there'd be some little bitty tiny eggs in there with some that was much bigger. Okay. Now see, I got a little lumpier there, so I want to spread that out so that it doesn't bunch up. Okay, so as my son reminded me, on this cake, it's not hard to make. It just takes patience. And he is very right about that. You want to be sure that you've got all of the flour mixture in there so there's no floury pockets. Okay, we're going to put it into our pan. You do not oil your pan for these cakes. And you're just going to try to get that around that evenly as you can. And again, we're talking patience. Really good cooks have patience. I don't know that I do. You don't want any air holes down in there. So you can kind of tap it down in there a little bit as you go. If you get a little along the side, that doesn't matter. You can clean that up later. But you want to do that before you bake it. It's really fluffy. I could almost just eat this by itself. And there are a lot of desserts that are made with egg whites, and don't be afraid to make them. Practice makes perfect. If the first one doesn't turn out that good, just look at where you went wrong and try it again. If it's really good, it's worth the effort. And a homemade angel food cake, once you've had one of them, you will not go back to store-bought cake. Okay, we're going to kind of spread that out, make it a little flatter on top, make it kind of even. You want to bring it over to where that it's even there on the inside and along on the outside of your cake pan. Sometimes you may have to maneuver it around a little bit and fill in some lower pockets. That's why the patience comes in. Because the peaks will brown first. And you don't want a black peak on top of your cake, because it will burn. Okay. That's fairly even. Now I'm going to take a wet, moist towel and just wipe up the edges around on the cake part. Okay, I'm just wiping off that edge, little on the inside there. We don't want anything left on that either. It can come up a little ways, but you don't want any big messes like this. It just makes it harder to get the cake out when you do. Okay, we're going to put that in the oven, 350, and we're going to leave it in there anywhere from 45 to 55 minutes. It's going to depend on yours. Now, before you put it in there, a couple of times on that, it helps settle and get rid of any air bubbles. All right, 45 minutes has been up. We're going to check that cake. You can really smell it. It smells good. Oh, that's a nice little beauty. Okay. It feels nice. Yeah. It kind of bounces back a little bit when it's touched. I believe it's done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to turn this upside down for it to cool, because you want the weight of that cake to keep it lifted up because of those egg whites. Looks like it's ready. Okay, it's upside down, ready to cool. Looks a little funny. If you've got a bottle, you can stick it upside down on top of that bottle. I just didn't have one. Make sure it's a glass bottle, because if it's plastic, the heat off this pan will melt that plastic, and you don't want that. Okay, our cake has cooled. We've cut it loose from the sides, took it off of the bottom, put it on a nice pie plate, and we're all ready to serve this luscious angel food cake.